in the room in there a minute ago, I introduced you to Dr. Ron Gill, and this is actually who he is. He was out here getting things set up for us, and I assure you, you're going to be in for a treat today. And I know this will probably save a lot of marriages, maybe a lot of hurt feelings, and maybe we should have had all of our other halves come, because that might have been who needed it worse. Dr. Ron Gill.
This is kind of a fun deal. We're going to see what all we can get these heifers done, but as we start this process, watch the heifers. Everything we do, they're paying attention to already. As I started moving, every one of them looked over here. Okay, so they already know that something's about to happen. They're going to see if I know what I need to know, or if they're going to have to act silly, right? And so as I've moved a little bit, they've started milling a little bit. Now they're also all looking at me primarily. And so everything we do, anytime we're around cattle, influences them. And so often we're busy doing other things that when we first start, we've actually told them something without realizing we've told them something. And it's interesting, the more we're looking at them, the more we're drawing them to us. So think about that. Where do we normally go to get cattle to move? Behind them. So this should tell us right now that we ought to be up here where they can see what we're doing and actually draw them to us a little bit. So my whole effort this morning is going to be trying to switch our mindset a little bit more to drawing cattle to you than pushing cattle away from you. And a calm fell over the stands. What the hell? I may leave. If there's clouds, there'd be lightning or something coming on. All right, and as we go through this, if y'all have some questions, don't hesitate to ask them. There we go. Because there's going to be some things that I say probably a little different than what you might have heard, and you know, the whole aspect of family relationships and family dynamics, that's an interesting part of this, and a whole lot more to cattle handling involves that personal dynamic than we ever want to admit as well. Right now, just here, you can stay here. And we'll get out here where we can start messing with them a little bit. Notice as I step in here again, it's going to change the dynamic and draw every one of them around here. So anything I do from now on is going to influence what they decide to do. But I'll just take a little bit of time to talk about that family dynamic, or even hired hand employee relationship, because all that spills over into the cattle. And I normally start this out asking, how many of you ever been in a fight with a family member at the cow lot? All right. If you haven't, then you probably haven't worked with many family members, or you're still new to this and you think it's romantic at this point in time. It loses that flair pretty quick sometimes. And unfortunately, it shouldn't. This should be one of the most fun things we get to do as a family. And growing up as a kid, was my experience. The most fun we had was working cattle, which is very different. Normally when I start talking about what my upbringing was, everybody expects it to be just a holy hell fight. One, we were scared to death of our dad. And so we tried not to do anything to get him really riled up. And what I'll normally start talking about is, how did we learn how to work cattle? Anybody send you off to a training, sit down with you and calmly explain what was going to happen, what we'd like for you to do, and if it doesn't go right, it's okay. We'll just regroup and do it again. You watched Dad, and then when you did something and you didn't get your butt chewed out, you tried to do that more often. That's the way my life was. And so you tried to figure out pretty quick how to avoid some butt chewings and avoid that family ire, I guess we could call it. That's a poor way to train people. But this is the only industry I know of in the world that wants to hire people or get people doing their job without training them. I don't know how many times I hear, I just can't find anybody to hire that knows everything they need to know. Well, duh. No other business does either. So why in the hell do we expect to hire somebody straight out of school or anything else and know everything they need to know? And we don't want to take the time to train them. Part of it is I don't think we know how to train people. I don't think we want to take the time, and I don't think we know how to communicate what we want done very effectively. And so hopefully part of today will be maybe some clues on how to communicate what you want to have happen and why. Because a lot of people want to know the why. Some people don't care what the why is. Some people, that means everything to them. And so you kind of have to learn how to read people to see how to train them. Anybody in here train dogs? Nobody trains dogs, but first crowd. Some of you do, just won't admit it in public. This is not an AA meeting of any kind. You can feel comfortable. No, but dogs are very different. You can't train every dog the same way, can you? Some of them you yell at and they're through. They'll never work with you again. Some people are that way. A lot of family members, they ain't going home because they got yelled at and they didn't think they deserved it. So we have to think about that, and that also is very true of these cattle. If they think they're doing what we ask them to do, and then we whoop their butts or hot shot them around because they're not doing what we think we told them to do, they don't like that either. And so we have to really think about what we're doing with these cattle and figure out how we can make them understand what we ask them to do. And it's funny, after I do some of these clinics, people that are working the human side of training will come up and want to know if I'll help them write a book about what I'm talking about here in relative to human training. It's kind of interesting. I'm not really interested in doing that, but the cows are easy to work. The people are a pain in the butt. And so the patience it takes to train people is tenfold what it is to train these cattle. Because they don't have a lot of preconceived notions about what's going to happen, and they have an innate understanding if I do this, they're supposed to do that. People are not that way. And so most of what we deal with in changing stockmanship is not training cattle, it's training the people to do it the way it needs to be done, which is interesting. And I go off the same basic principles every time. And there's 3 ways we communicate with cattle. Primarily, there is a 4th one, but I don't really worry about it that much. People in the dairy industry really do worry about smell. They say cows can pick up smells and odors, and they can react differently. But primarily, we communicate with cattle through sight. Okay, so what they see is what they react to. Second thing we can use is sound. I try to use sound to get them to look at me. I don't use it as a pressure, but a little bit of sound, maybe a snap of a finger or a cluck or something like that can put a lot more pressure on cattle. What you don't want to do is just be running around screaming and hollering. And the first thing I used to always tell everybody, if you do anything else when you go, and Temple Grandin still says this, if you don't do anything else, just shut up when you're working cows. But there's some of you that will explode if you can't vent, okay? So I've kind of backed off that a little bit, but my preference is to not say anything all day long when you're working cattle, other than conversational tone between people. Because if you project and scream at cattle, that has intent, okay? Now me yakking on this PA system, that's not bothering these cattle. I can be over there talking to you all and it won't bother the cattle. But if I go to yelling at the cows, they know the difference. Same thing, if y'all have loud friends, y'all may be that loud friend. And some people will just tune you out and you can be loud all you want to and it don't bother them. You bring somebody else new into that scenario and like, oh my God, they're loud all the time. And so it has a different impact on different people on noise. Same thing on cattle. So we have to be careful and use it to our best advantage. If you get some old dead cows, that are kind of dull, I may actually scream at them a little bit because I want them to feel a little more energy and move. And so when you're doing what we're talking about today, your danger is getting them too gentle, not them being too wild. And so I can make these cattle really dull today to where they don't want to work if I'm not careful. Now, if they're real wild, it takes a while to do that. And it takes a while to retrain some cattle, and then you get some genetic differences in disposition and those kind of things. But for the most part, they found them a safe zone, haven't they? So I'm gonna have to go interrupt their morning. But when I do that, I'm gonna do it through sight. I'm gonna try to get them to move off pressure. And there's 5 basic things about cattle I want you to remember. One, that whole want to see you, be where they can see you. And if they're not where you're not in a clear line of sight, it's going to change where their head goes so they can see you, and that's going to change your direction. So we can use it to our advantage or disadvantage. If we want them going straight, you can't stay out of focus. You got to get out here where they can see you. Because if you get in behind them, they're going to start turning. They're like a drunk, go where their nose goes. Okay, so you got to keep their head going where you want it to. The other one is that they have that tendency to go around you, and part of that's because where we position ourselves. And we'll talk about using that a lot of time in our processing areas. We actually want cattle to come around us and exit. Okay? They are herd animals, so if we can get one of them to go, the rest of them will go. And this is where I really want to think about if I'm back behind them, how do I get the front started? Can I do that? Yeah, you can. It just takes a little more effort. You got to put more pressure on the back so where either they work through the herd and go, or you can just start on the front and send the first one, let the rest of them follow them. That's a whole lot easier most of the time, but it's not always something you can do. The other one is that they want to remove pressure. This whole flight zone, pressure zone thing we talk about with cattle, we don't want them to flee, so we don't want to enter the flight zone per se, but we want to figure out where the edge of it is and use that as a pressure point. Now, here's the other thing. If I've got them out here, their pressure point's way away from them, isn't it? Because they're over in the corner right now. So my job's gonna be to work that down out here where they know they can take that pressure off so that when I get them in a confined situation, they don't overreact to it. They've got to learn to take pressure. And out here is the place to teach them how to take pressure, because they can take it off. And so I have to go talk to them about what we're going to do here. So as I get them in a corral, if we haven't taken that flight zone off, they get in panic mode in the pens. And how have we handled that in Texas and Oklahoma in particular? We built pipe pens. We use 4-inch drill stem, 2 7/8-inch pipe, and we can do whatever the hell we want to them, and they can't get away. Honest to God, that's what happened. And so we used to tear pens down. It's been a whole lot easier to change the way we work cattle. If you want to work cattle with somebody really good, go somebody that's got wire pens, made up bed springs and headboards and stuff like that. Pallets. You don't get crazy in there because they'll depart, right? How many panels have you seen the top rail crushed on in somebody's pens? That's an animal's response to excessive pressure. That's their last resort to bail out. Okay? If we see that, those are symptoms. Bent gates. I can go into a set of corrals and tell you where you have trouble. We go into auction markets all the time and we look for where they have electricity, whether it be a hot shot or drop lines or whatever. That's where they can't figure out how to make cattle to work. So that's where we work on what they're doing to make that work better. All right, want to see you, go around you, follow one another. They are herd animals, so we'll get that first one started. Removing pressure is a big one. Everything I want to talk about today is pressure and release. It's no different than training anything else. Putting pressure, see what response you get out of it. And the last ones are this whole thought process. Cattle are pretty simple-minded. We think they can only think of one main thought at a time. So we've got to get them to think about what we want them to do and then get them to do it. Okay, so just getting them to think about it's not good enough. I always use this analogy to probably go over better in this crowd than it does some. They're a lot like a guy. All right, you give us a task, and what's the old joke? Don't ask us every 6 months if we finished it, right? Because if it's unpleasant, what do we like to do? We'll postpone it. We'll figure out something more important to go do, or just go fishing, just be honest about it, or whatever it might be. So what do we have to do to get an unpleasant task done, even though they know it needs to be done. Sometimes we've got to keep pressure on them. Keep reminding them, keep it up front in their mind that they got to complete that task. Same thing on cattle. If I want them to go through a chute, they don't want to go through a chute. But if I keep enough pressure on them, that's a better option than me putting pressure on them. And so they'll do that unpleasant task on their own. So that's what we're going to talk about doing. It's interesting, they've already crept out of the corner. I'm not quite the threat I was first got in here, right? All right, so as I start toward them, they're going to start responding to me, and I'll work them around here a little bit, and then we'll try to pin them in down here and go through the chute and practice with them a little bit. We're not going to be able to do a whole lot on facility stuff here because we don't have a setup where we'll see how bucking chutes work for a lead up, but we'll see how that works. But we do have some pens down here, and so if I have enough time, I may put them in these pens down here, and we'll talk about sorting and moving cattle around that way. So we may move around a little bit, but that's all fine and good too. Y'all look like y'all are starting to shiver anyway. So, all right, so as I move, they've all started looking again. There's a lot of distractions around here as well, but when I start working with them, they're gonna pay attention to me. And the rest of it's not gonna be that big an issue to them. So as I approach them, I've got to figure out where they start responding. And right now they've not responded at all, but right now they're starting to. Y'all can start to see that motion, and not enough to make them leave, but they're starting to feel pressure. So when they do move, I'm gonna stop. That's what I want them to realize. That's all the pressure I have to put to get them to move. And that's what I wanted them to do. So now I'll go do it again. I'll reposition myself a little further. I want them to go to the other end where they're not comfortable. And so I'm gonna position myself around here where I can push on an eye. And this is something I hadn't talked about yet. But to communicate with cattle, we do it through sight and sound. And I've just realized I'm not sure those panels are tied on that end, so I'm gonna be real careful here for a minute. So sight and sound, everything we need to communicate with on these cattle in the front 4 inches of their body. So I don't worry about anything from the ears back. It's gonna go where the rest of the body goes. And so now I've been able to send them off with that much pressure. I want them to get to where they'll walk off and not run off. And so that's my next objective, but I do want to see. So now, I know these heifers will leave when I put pressure on them. So what I need to do next is get them to where they'll kind of start and stop as I need them to. But I want to work just a little more pressure. I'm going to try to send them around this way right now. Because I don't want them to feel that's the only place they can go. Not because the corner's not secure, but they need to get comfortable going anywhere around here. So now I've got a little bit of movement. I'm just going to step to them to try to keep that movement going, but not let them get so fast. So if they start speeding up, I'm going to go with their movement and slow them down and stop them. See how far out here I can stop their movement? Now if I want them to go forward, I was a little bit late and they turned back, but I can come back down their side and it will start movement again. Now I'm going to have to watch them because if they start, I'm going to go faster, slow them down. So they're working from a long distance away, but this is really nice. They actually have some softness. They get to going too fast, I'll speed up again. Now they're getting comfortable with that. So I want them to stop, but I want them to keep looking at me. So I'm just going to keep coming in here and draw their attention and stop them. Now that one started backing up. I'm going to keep backing up, try to draw their head back this way if I can. There we go. Now I want to send them on forward. Up, one heifer turned back. I was a little late. I wasn't paying attention to her. So I'll just go down here and we'll kind of regroup. And as long as they're all turning different directions, they're not going to go anywhere. Now that was fixing to leave. But that's fine. I'm going to just back off, take pressure off of her. But now I'll see if I can slow them down. I may use the fence if I have to. I just don't want them coming to this corner. There we go. But I got them stopped before the fence. Now I'm going to draw them back around this way, hopefully. If If I can, I'll have to step over and push their eye around and send them back. Now, how these little heifers looking here? I'm gonna see if I can draw this one's eye back out. If I can, well, I've got too many of them going the other way. I don't think I can get that done. So I'll just let her go back to the other ones. And we'll walk back down. Well, we may just go to this corner over here. Let them know that's all right too. And I don't know if any of you happen to be in the business of ordering or order buying or putting together cattle. But if you're buying groups from different areas, they're not going to act as a herd. So one thing you can do is actually work with them to get them to work as a herd. And if you have them split and run to different groups, these are all going to stay in a group. You can then get into a situation where you can actually take and put pressure on the ones that leave the main herd and make them want to stay with the big group. So right now, I'm just going to take a little bit of time and try to turn these heifers around and go down this fence to try to get to that corner. I don't want to put too much pressure on them because I don't want them to feel like this is too much pressure for them to take, because I need them to go in that gate in a minute. Now I'm going to step out here a little bit. Now, as I stepped out, I actually turned them that wrong direction. This little heifer would like to leave, but she's responsive, so I can actually use her to go back into the herd probably and push them on up a little further. Now, this is where some people might just go to screaming and hollering and making a lot of racket, but this would be where you'd blow up everything too. So these heifers are getting curious as to what I'm wanting them to do here. Here I'm going to be able to push on these eyes and turn them back down the fence if I can, or I'll turn these around and go the other way with them. Now I'm getting pretty close for this one here. She's not wanting to take the pressure, so I'll try to draw her out, send her forward. Now see, I just want to roll these heifers around. They're getting where they don't want to go any further. We're just going to keep spending a little bit of time. Some of them are going to get tired of this nonsense and they'll move forward. I keep thinking we hadn't made much progress, but we have, hadn't we? All right. Now these heifers I'd like to send around. They can go be the front for a chain. I stepped out here and draw her out. Then I can send her back around to the front. Just keep rolling these heifers up. There we go. Notice I get too much movement, I got to back off a little bit. They're actually, they've got some nerves about them, but they're actually working pretty nicely here. All right. Now then, I want them to know that if they get to that corner like I'm asking them to, I'll take the pressure off. And so I want them to feel like they can get to that point and relax. They'd still like to run through the green panels, but at least they're still there, right? And so they'll relax a little bit, and then I can move them off. Next time I'll come back and I'll open the gate and we'll try to put them in there. But if I take the pressure off, I want them to stay. I don't want to, remember what I said about keeping enough pressure, they'll do the right thing. It's interesting, they're watching Jeremy, they're just not real sure what she's going to do. No, she's fine, don't move. But they've just discovered her standing over there. And so now they're curious as to who they need to listen to. All right, they've been pretty good. And this whole working, pulling on an eye and pushing on an eye is something I think is very important that we learn to do. Now, if she starts going too fast, I'm just going to step up and slow them down. Now, see that snorty one, she don't want to she wants to run off. She doesn't want to listen, so she'll go back in the group. But now I can bring up some calmer ones to the front if she does. And I've got better brakes on them probably. There we go. Now I want to draw these out and we're going to send them back down the center of the arena. And what I may try to do is just actually make them a circle right here. We'll talk about drawing on an eye. If they don't take off too fast, they may take off too fast. But if I step in here behind them, nope, they're going. Sometimes you can draw their eye back around. Well, we're getting close. But they never did commit. That one heifer, when she gets to trotting, she likes to go somewhere. So we'll get to work on her. Because you get one like that in the lead, they can make things a little different. They're not going to hurt you that bad. They want to come off down here. We're going to try to go this other corner now. That's something else. If you're out in the pasture and working your cattle, you want to be able to take them anywhere. And so, you know, a lot of people are just using feed wagons or whatever it might be to draw their cattle everywhere. And if that's the case, sometimes we miss an opportunity to train them when we have them out here. We need to be able to move them because there's going to be a time when you can't get them to follow a cake wagon. When grass is getting pretty green at my house, they don't follow the cookie wagon anymore. Maybe I don't feed enough, I don't know. It's interesting. Look how close I am to them now, and they're taking the pressure. They may bolt and run, but as they start to move, I'll take a little pressure off. Because I want these to keep going. I need to go slower than they are to get them to keep moving. Because if I go faster, they're going to stop. Here, I'll push on this little heifer. Well, I'll let her take care of her business first, which may be a mistake. I'll have to stop these if I do. But I'd like to send her kind of around the front and let her be the lead for a second. So if I can step in here, get her to start taking this bunch around. You girls like to take care of your business here. This spot's a little tougher for them for some reason. But we've got them going both directions, so I'm not worried about those leaving. These are the ones that have a little more flight to them. So I'll let them go back into the group. And now I have to be ready to turn these into the corner. Now this one back here would like to leave, but I'm gonna see if I can bait her into this bunch. So you have to learn to watch the whole group and kind of let the dynamics actually work to your favor. Now by not getting overly pushy, they've decided to take the pressure and go to the gate, which is what I wanted them to do in the first place. So that's exactly what I wanted them to do, but I have to be careful how I manage this group to get them to go over there, or they just bust and run. All right, I'm gonna try something here. If you're penning cattle and sometimes you need to move a group or individual, you can take them and set them up. I'm gonna try to put them in that little alleyway over here. But to do that, I gotta get them back over there and then kind of facing where I want them to go. Now there's where, see, I want these cattle to learn how to stop. That was nice. I had to jog a little bit, but that's good for me too. But I got them to stop, and I'm gonna get them to turn back just a little bit. they found something else to be curious about. I'm gonna try to ease them up to that corner where we were a while ago, or a little closer. Just I want her to look. Now what I want to try to do is to get them where they'll stop in a position to watch me go open the gate. And this is why I don't want them turning back when I stop them. And they may turn back, but right now they're still kind of watching. But if they see me open that gate, when I turn it back to them, I spend a little too much time looking at them. They're gonna make me run all the way to the end this time. Maybe. But they still saw the gate open, so they know what we're up to. All right, so now we get to do it again, girls. Look how much closer I'm able to work with them now than I was to start with. Now I'm not going to worry about the back. I've got to worry about the front, keep it moving. Because this one's not going to, she may draw them back, they're looking across the way. But as long as I keep the front moving, I can get them to go where I need to go. There, I got to get this one to quit looking across the racetrack. We talk about distractions all the time. You know, so they haven't worried about anything other than another person moving. So all of our distractions we worry about, for the most part, are people. I want her to keep looking forward. She may not take the gate, but I'm not going to fuss about it if she doesn't. I hope the back gate's open or closed. I don't want her to leave either. This is that same thing on rolling around. If I can roll these around, I'll get them to take that alleyway. Now I'm in a setup here where I can actually push this one around, maybe. Didn't work. Well, now we got them facing the wrong way, so I got to work on that. This little heifer likes to leave for some reason. If she starts to run off, I've got to take pressure off quickly. She's the same one that wanted to go to the corner a while ago too. I made a mistake of putting too much pressure when I thought I could get it done over here on the side, and she didn't take that well at all. If this, now we're getting some pressure. There we go. All it takes is one to commit and a little patience. All right. I wasn't sure about that for a minute. Right here, we do the same thing we've been doing the rest of the day. We can step down their side and send them into the chute. Okay? So the V works no different than a bud box might, and I'll use the pin. Actually, what I was doing down here sorting would mimic what a bud box would do. I put pressure on them, they come forward and they follow one another out. So that's what a bud box design allows you to do. And we can talk more about that if we need to. Sweep systems are another interesting design. And there's a lot of argument about which is better, bud boxes or sweep tubs, and that's the most nonsensical discussion I've ever seen in my life. They all work if they're designed right and they're worked right. What I find is the people that use a bud box can't figure out how to make a tub work, and so they cuss tubs. A lot of people that work a tub all the time can't figure out how to make a bud box work. And so it's just, you got to learn the system you're using. In a lead up to a chute, you'd like to be able to stage cattle, have them ready to come. This one is going to be hard because they can probably turn around the bucking chute. I'm not real sure, but I think they can. So if we get cattle in here, I think they're going to be able to turn around the bucking chute. So this first time, I'm actually just going to run everything through. We're not even going to stop them. And if I do that, then the next time we put them in, when Jeremy's working this afternoon, they're more likely to stay facing forward. And we'll probably repin them and run them through again before this is over with, because this is not a real good setup. And so the easier we can teach them to come in here, the better off we'll be, okay? So with that said, these little heifers are working pretty good. I'll step back here. Y'all probably step back a little bit, but what I want y'all to do, if they balk right here, Deb, you want to tell them what to do? Yep. Deb's good at this. So if they go to balking right here, she'll walk down their side and speed them up. If you're bringing cattle from the and sometimes you got to be careful. This is something, you can't be too prescriptive about this either. Because normally we'll go to them and down their side. But if they start backing up, you may have to move out a little bit to release them. So then go in at an angle and in and out. So it's not just walk down their side fast. I had a friend of mine wanted to come train his wife because she wouldn't listen to him. So I went over and worked carry with him, and I told him, you got to quit being a hard ass because she's right and you're wrong. Because she was trying to do it right and he wasn't letting her. And every time she'd walk down the aisle, they were backing calves out of their little system. And she had to come around a door in a barn, which put her right against the crowd alley. So it just started them backing up, and they were down close to the entrance anyway. By the time she got there, they were backed out. So what I had her doing was standing at the other end of the barn. When they came through, she'd put a lot of pressure on them when they stepped in the race, and they'd go all the way to the front. And so you just got to learn where to put pressure and what your system allows you to do, so it can't be prescriptive like that. You have to learn how to read cattle. All right? We'll see what these little goobers decide to do. Because this is kind of a V system right here too. And by the way, we're putting them in the out gate. So it's actually got an alleyway on the other end, bring cattle around to load the bucking chute. But this will be kind of like an old V-shaped forcing pin right here. And so we'll just talk about how to use it. This is one thing, I was in Canadian Texas last week, and I made the comment, I said, how many people have ever taken a cutting torch to a set of pins? If it's there in perpetuity, right? And I was proud. There were 3 young men in there that had cut their corrals down and dug them out of the ground and started over. That just doesn't happen very often. So when you have issues, you got to either figure out how to make it work or then cut it out. Here's something else. If you've got an old set of pins that the alleyway's too wide, you can set portable panels in here and use that to narrow your chute down. Years ago, we had an old system that Debbie was going to quit me on because she was loading the cattle and they were all turning around, and it was a big long lead up about like this. She'd have to unload them all, turn them all around, start over. And I got a finger wagging that day. Fix this or I'm through kind of deal, I think's what she said. So we put panels on the inside and it was still too wide for yearlings. So then we put 4x6 posts in between the panels and the outside, and that was our adjustable alley. You had a 4-inch or a 6-inch, or you could pull the post out.
On something that works pretty good on that, and we have to do that at home, is if you just get you some old car tires you've thrown away, roll them in first, and then put the panel against it. That gives them shock, but get it facing out.
Yep. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And I've seen pallets set in here and everything else. And a lot of them will do it and they'll just have something they can drag it up over the side and out of the way. For us, it was easier to kick the panels out than it was anything. So just, like I said, figure out what works and go with that. All right, these heifers, when they get down here, they're not gonna see a place to go probably. So I'm gonna bring a few at a time and I'll keep pressure on them here and then Deb can come down their side and send them, because it looks like they're going into a speaker from my angle. Y'all ever been like Temple Grandin always goes through her working facilities to see what she sees? And this ain't good. Just FYI. Going right into the grandstands, all sorts of stuff down there. So they're not gonna see a way out. So we're gonna have to put enough pressure on them that they can continue to make the right decision until they get out of here, okay? So I'll probably bring, that's the other thing, there's no good way to do this. Because once they get in here, I really can't keep them in here. Unless well, I can, but it's gonna be different. Like I said, I wanna keep this manageable. I really just want 4 head. Then once I can step in here, I can put pressure on them and get them to make that right decision. Then I'm gonna keep putting pressure. Deb keep putting pressure on the front. When they see that, she step into them right there, send them around that corner, and we're out. But had we not kept pressure on them, where would they have stopped? Right here, first. And so you have to keep enough pressure on them to make the right decision. Next time they'll know how to get out of here and it won't be that big a deal. Now that first bunch was a little, so I've got to put a little more flight in these. I got to get my first one to go. That's where these old systems where you're working from behind is a little challenging. Now she got to be careful that she don't send these back over the top of me, but now we have draw though. Once we get these committed, then she can work from the front. Now unfortunately we got the gentlest one in the front, but we'll just let her work through until let her figure it out. But if she balks, we'll go to her. Now, go ahead and just let them see if they can figure it out. Let them just stop right there. I'd like for them to figure it out on their own. If they do, then they'll think their way through it from now on. That first bunch was a little fractured. We may have put too much pressure on them the first time, but we wasn't sure how that was going to work. Now these have watched those other heifers. It's really interesting. They learn by watching. Hey, Brownie. But see, they respect my push on the eye. I'll just keep enough pressure they don't turn back, and Deb can go to them. Now that's perfect. She stepped to them, got them moving. Now that one there turned back. That's my fault. She probably could have put a little more pressure on the front there. There you go. Now back off. The reason we're backing off here is because then they got to have time to think their way through it. Now if she don't want it, I got to put pressure. So that's one of them decisions. She really didn't want to do that, but we can put enough pressure to get them back in there. All right. So now we got a whole crew here. We're going to pin them again. Is the reason we're going to do it again. Why are we doing this again? Y'all get to help. Y'all don't get to leave. What the heck? But there's actually about a 10% increase in conception rate if we'll acclimate our cattle to this system before we start an AI program. There's not much you can do to boost conception rate to AI better than 10%. Just because you take the stress off of coming through the system. So if they're sticky going through, run them through again. And it doesn't matter if it takes 2 or 3 times. We normally do 3 before we start. And when we pull cedars, we'll normally run them back through because they get a little sticky about the time you pull cedars. So we'll pull cedars and at least run part of them back through. And that way we get them lined out ready to go. So it's important whether you're AIing or if you want your vaccine, if it's that much stress is affecting reproduction, think about what it's doing to health, vaccine response, all the other things that are associated with stress response, okay? So anything we can do like this to change that dynamic, the better off we are. And you'll be amazed how much easier they run through this time than they did the first time. And it wasn't bad the first time, they were just nervous, it's all new. So I guarantee you they've never been in a bucking chute. They've never been through a brand new painted Filson chute. And so all that's new to them, and they got to figure it out. All right, so now we're going to have a big T. You know, it actually makes it worse. It honestly does. Because then you got to be real careful about where pressure's been placed. And if you've got a ranch where you have to bring a big crew in to gather your cattle, once you get them gathered, see if you can't find something for at least half the crew to leave and go do. Honestly, because if they stay there, they're going to want to help. You're paying them, so they want to be engaged, they want to help, so they're going to be in the way. And so the best thing to do is to hire people to help you gather, let half of them go home, keep 4 or 5 in the processing area. All right, now those in the stands, this is going to be entertaining, because here's my instruction to the crew out here. Stay in a straight line. This is hilarious. No, I'm going to be one end of the line, she's going to be the other. See, I forgot a key part of that line deal, but I'm proud of them, they were going to it. All right, Deb's got to go to them. We got the biggest frickin' T in Oklahoma right now. All right, now as she goes, y'all got to go with her. Spread out down the T. These heifers are going, oh my, y'all keep spreading with Deb. There's a way big gap between Debbie and the heifers. They can't hear me? See how this is entertaining, isn't it? Deb, what are you doing? Get back to the fence, you're at the bottom of the T. No, get back to the fence, we got a different deal here. When you're working a T, you can't do it like you'd do it if you're an individual. Because I'm shutting down some flow for you, or this line is. So you got to stay over there and keep pressure. We're now getting a U, not a T. And it's the ones in the middle got to keep up. No, I'm not. I'm out away from them. Y'all, the bow and the T allowed those cattle to come back to the middle. Okay, so the T's got to stay straight. See, as we get our T right, this actually gets pretty smooth. We should be able to just keep our T going, keep walking. Don't let a bow in the middle of it. That was a really good example of how a T is supposed to work. Thank y'all very much. But it's not easy to stay in a line, is it? No. And you see how that little bow in the middle gave them a place to move. And so they started coming around. So that's where that pressure has to be even if you're doing that. This T is the hardest thing to get people to try.
What if you're in a situation where you don't have a fence?
You don't have a fence?
Yep.
Then the T would actually be across this way. You're still in a straight line. The T would basically be the fence. And you'd be working out. So somebody would be way the heck over here and somebody would be way the heck over here. Okay? But yeah, and going back and forth. If you ever watch dogs work, you know, they come around the side, but what happens when they come around the side? Cattle will turn to them, won't they? Then they'll turn them back around and run them. If dogs would go straight out, they wouldn't cause that motion. So that's the difference in what they can do and what we can do. ATVs, if you're using an ATV, you can make a pretty good T with an ATV, but you got to run a straight line behind them. Well, I see people that come into them and turn toward the cattle, When you do that, actually draws the cattle out and turns them. So then you got to make another big circle and go back out there and head them. So if you're using an ATV, go way out there and turn away from the cattle and come back. So you get far enough away, you can reposition yourself before you come back and engage them. It's amazing how well that works. But yeah, we had a friend in Florida. I always say that if you got a zero turn mower, you got to have something other than mowing the grass to justify an $8,000 mower. So in a mower, the cattle can actually see you, so they actually work really good. So if you got flat surface, I had a friend in Florida that had cattle get out on the highway and he was mowing his yard, so he's got on a zero turn, went down there and gathered them.
Ashby Green.
Yep, y'all know Ashby. And if you think about it, I've gathered cattle with tractors, the cattle work better in an open cab tractor than they do in a cab tractor because of the presence. Other than that, they just see the tractor moving. If you open the doors on a tractor, they'll work better. You can also tear your doors off, but they can see you and they'll respond to you better. It's really interesting how they will respond to you. The thing that I've never been able to work one on is a skid steer. They can't see you, even though you got, particularly in a cab one. I tried one time to run them off a hay truck. That didn't work. All right, I'm just gonna bring them all this time. There's all sorts of driving aids. There's whips, flags, whatever, and they are just an extension of you. But that also means that they can be counterproductive, because if you're not real cautious about where they're at, they put pressure you don't know they're putting. Now, I probably do that more than I don't need a paddle. I mean, my big old mitts looks like something sticking out there. So I don't have anything against them, but use them for what they're supposed to be. They are an aid. They're an extension of your body. The biggest problem I see is the impact they have on cattle that we don't perceive. And that's why I quit using. I used to always carry a sorting stick. It was like a pacifier to me or something. I don't know, it was kind of weird. But every time I was giving a talk, I was standing holding a sorting stick. I carried one all the time we were working. And we were bringing I was working by myself one day and bringing cows into the crowd or the sweep tub, and they were flinching when they went by me, and it was sticking straight down about a foot from my body. I was just holding it still. But when they come around, they were flinching. So what the hell, are they flinching at that thing? So I threw it out of the sweep. They quit flinching. I've never used another one. Because if I had it still and I was still influencing the cattle and didn't know it, then I couldn't imagine what I was doing when I was waving it. And it's also a really good way to let them gauge how far away you are so they can kick the crud out of you. So if you tap one of them with it, they're 4 feet away. Paya! So that's the other thing. Driving aids, if you touch cattle with them, they tend to create a kicking response. And so that's another reason I don't use them. Another reason I'm not particularly fond of biting dogs, because they will teach cattle to kick. I had my veterinarian known Dr. Hargrove's been in practice for 30-something years before he went to work for us 10 years ago. And he was over at our research station in Overton last week. And I didn't know this had happened, but I get an email while we're sitting in Canadian, Texas, and it's a workers' comp claim for a broke tooth. Well, what in the heck Dr. Hargrove do? And then read down the bottom, it says, cow kicked rock into tooth. I called Dr. Hargrove. I said, what the heck happened? And he said he walked down had an old Brahman cow that was really agitated. And he walked past her down the chute like we were talking about. And as soon as he got past her, he turned around. Well, she jumped forward and kicked and had a rock in between her toes, and it hit him in the tooth and broke his tooth out. So when you walk past them, don't look back. Keep walking. All right.
That's crazy.
She was a little bit silly. All right, we're going to see if these will run through again. And Deb, I'm going to let you stay at the front or work that corner. But let's see if they'll go through without any additional pressure.
I'll only move if they balk.
And they may probably, this is kind of like the discussion I had about the man and his wife. I think our best pressure is going to be right here to create this flow forward on this set. So if they balk right here, we'll put pressure on them. Now here's the other side of it. Jeremy might be in a better place to do that.
Okay.
Because if they come around, if they balk right here, she can step to them and send them forward. You good with that? Yeah. All right. And I'm gonna bring them all this time. And I'm just gonna try to hold them right here and let them funnel into that system. That may be a mistake.
We'll try.
It worked so good the first time, I probably shouldn't. But let's just see if they can figure it out. They've been through it once, and they want to take pressure off. Nope, now Sheremy moved on me. I didn't know Sheremy moved. She's in the wrong spot. I need her to be down here. So when they come around this corner, they're coming around Sheremy. Okay? When she moved down there, they can see her at a distance and it stops flow. So if she works this corner, she can put pressure on them. I just probably right here in this corner. And I'm gonna bring less. That's too many. If they get turned back, I have trouble controlling them. Try to just bring half of them at a time. Now see how they came around Sheremy right there? That location of people is a big deal. Big, big deal. That's pretty work right there. See how she just eased into them, creating that draw and that flow. That's perfect. See how little Deb had to do there to draw that one out? And how far away she could do it. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you think of if you put blinders on the alleyway so they can't see out?
Okay. The question was, what about putting solid sides or blinders on the alleyway or the chute? There are places that's really important, okay? But if I want them to see Sheremy, I better not cover it up. So she can actually help in that instance by them seeing her. They seeing on this side and seeing Deb. Now, I might cover that off corner where they're not seeing something out there that's distracting them and pushing back. But the side that I work on, I normally want to be open. Maybe half sheeted. The off side where we're not working, I'd probably cover. So particularly if you have cattle in pens or alleyways over there, cover that so they're not stopping and trying to go with their buddies. We had a great example in Canadian. It was open-sided system, but we had the cattle in the pen next to them. And they'd get in that open-sided and they'd try to go through the panels. You could make, I mean, once they figured out they couldn't, they'd go ahead and go forward. But if that'd been solid, they'd just flown like butter. And so that's where solid sides, the whole solid sides, open sides argument drives me nuts too. There are places for both, okay? And I do like the bottom sheeted one if you're gonna run calves through it. They can't stick their little head out and get out underneath them. But on the other side, it probably would be better solid. There's places where it gets too hot if you do that. And so temperature, heat stress, everything else comes into play as to whether or not you cover some of this stuff. Because if it blocks too much airflow, that may not be good either. And louvers on chutes, there's a lot of chutes coming out now that have louvers on them. And that's fine and good too. We can talk about chutes for a second if y'all want to come over here. But there's also a dead spot on a chute. If I'm standing right here, cattle can't see me when they start in the chute. As they start, I can step and walk down their side and catch their head. So I can actually use that blind spot to let them get started, and then I can step down their side. You kind of have to step out away from them or you can back them up again. These have a self catch on them. Most chutes do nowadays, where you can set that. I took it off this one because it doesn't open far enough with it on there. But that you can, if cattle balk, then you have it set. You can go down here. This one, I like one you can actually work. And this is something else about chute technology. There's not very many chutes. You can work the back gate and the head gate by yourself. But they are better, okay? There's real advantage. If you've got plenty of people, if I have plenty of people though, I don't want him standing here running it. Right, he's kind of in the way. So if I have somebody running the back gate, I just send them be right here and they can step to the cattle. Because this person's put too much pressure on the one in the chute a lot of times. But this is pretty hard to work. Okay? So you can't get your back gate closed and run your head gate. So those are things you think about. You've just added one more person because of equipment design. But they'll use their excuse is they'll set the self-catch, open this, step down their side, and you can get them in there, close the gate, and then you can let them in the head gate if they don't self-catch. So there are pros and cons to each of these.
What kind of head chute would you say that this is?
This, oh, and well, I'm not in Texas. I'll tell you what I think now. Filsons have been around forever. They are a good utility chute. They have some things about them I'm not crazy about. So this is a Filson. WW, Pearson, nearly all of those chutes have something similar in a head gate with this scissor type self-catch head gate. I kind of like those. If you have horn cattle, they're kind of interesting to work because you can't open them back far enough a lot of times for horn cattle to get their head through them. But I've used a lot of WW chutes. They're not made as heavy as they used to be. I use a Prefert chute that I can flat fly processing cattle with a Prefert chute, and not the old ones. Where's my Prefert rip? Go to at least the SO4. They work 100% better than the old chutes did. Okay, and I'm not going to mix words about that. The SO4 is a hell of a lot better chute than the old ones were. But the person can operate the head gate and the tail gate at the same time. We were doing some demos in North Carolina or South Carolina here the other day, and I don't know that I've ever processed cattle faster than we were in that chute.
The reason that's not SO4 sitting there is because these are sold out. It's supposed to be one sitting there, but she's sold out.
I knew you would check with her. So you see a lot of these old utility chutes, and there's some Tartar chutes and stuff like that. If you have a tractor supply around, those will get you by, but they're not real safe sometimes. The material they're made out of is not quite as strong. They are cheaper, but cheap is not only about cost. Safety is the biggest factor involved.
One broken arm will pay for a better equipped, safer chute.
Yeah. So, and there's so many pinch points on these old chutes. These squeezes bang back right here. Now notice they put a plate right here because there's people used to stand around. Now this poor schmuck back here, if he's standing around talking and you open that squeeze, he is fingerless, okay? And I've seen it happen. They'll just cut your finger off right there. Hydraulic chutes, the gate can fly open and hit you. There's a really good chute. I like the SO4. There's a Titan chute I like. I don't like their head gate necessarily that well. But the Aero-equipped chutes are pretty easy to use. They're very fluid in their motion. The two easiest ones I think for people with not a lot of upper body strength is a Prefert chute and the Aero-equipped. Okay? Those are actually the two that are a little easier to work from down here.
I'm making gestures behind you. I can barely.
That spring's pretty stout right there.
I can't work this.
If you did, you'd be a little tuckered by the end of the day.
And what scares me about this is you pull it down and you're trying to push up. If I lose my grip, watch this. So that could kill somebody.
And this one here is you pull this down If you got cattle in there, you've got to release it like this, but then you've got to push that all the way up to get it up out of the way.
Do it again.
Go ahead and squeeze it.
So,
And you also get to run rust down your collar every once in a while. But just go use a chute. Before you buy one, get out there in the parking lot and wear it out. I'm serious. I mean, see how fast you can make it work, see how fast you can get through it. If you can't do it fluidly and with some speed, you're going to get behind and miss cattle in the processing. Now, even on the preferred chute with SO4, if you use the right motion with the head gate, it's real easy. But if you pull out on it, it'll bind on you. And I see some people they're used to pulling on a head gate and pull out, and the darn thing won't slide easy enough. So you got to keep them lubed up, keep everything greased up and working like it's supposed to. Chutes are a personal preference. There are some really good features about nearly every chute out there. So I don't mean to trash them, but as we've started these women in ranching events, that when we started looking around for chutes that you could actually work and physically not wear yourself out at the end of the day, it's a fairly small number, to be honest with you, because of upper body strength. And if you think about the average age of the person that buys the first hydraulic chute is what? 65 or 67, one or the other. So, why?
They've been hurt and they can't do this.
When you wear out, you'll go buy a hydraulic. When you retire, you got your retirement check, you're going to spend your inheritance, spend your kids' inheritance, so you'll go buy a hydraulic chute. All right? When people retire from another job, they go and they're worried about safety, they'll buy a hydraulic chute. There is nothing in this industry that has a higher resale value than a hydraulic chute. Buy you a good chute. You'll either be happy with it for years or you can sell it for what you paid for it. Okay? So I'd encourage you, if you can, to buy a hydraulic chute. Just to start with. You can put wheel kits on them if you need to, but they are so much easier on you physically than a manual chute, even the best manual chutes. But they're about twice as high. Okay.
Put the controls somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is something interesting about hydraulic chutes. I guess because we've always had the handles right here on manual chutes, we mount all the hydraulic controls right here. Well, that puts you right in the way. Okay? So some of them now have an arm that will swing it out here. That's better. So at least get the adjustable arm. You can actually bring it, if you can bring it back to the back here, it actually works better than if you swing it toward the front. Because you can open the back, you're here, you can put pressure on that animal and there's nobody in front of them. So all those things kind of come into play when you're looking at these and thinking about where to get it. But most of the portable chutes may have their handles mounted on the side, but you can still normally get that arm to where you can move it. Or you can build an arm, put on it, nothing else. So I'm not here trying to sell equipment, just think about the safety features on them. And the other part is, if I do have to squeeze one of them, where's my handle?
In your way.
It's right here where we're trying to do BQA processing, right? And so in this particular chute, you're normally going to not squeeze them because it's going to be in your way. But then you can't restrain them enough to get in here safely. So all of those things you have to think about. This chute's not built with a whole lot of neck access either. And if I have to stick my hand in here to give a shot, that's not the best place to do it. Okay? This door is a little too far back. Getting that, you probably could get in there, but that's going to be right in the middle of your business. So all those things are something to think about. This is a stout old chute, I'll give it that. And it'll probably last forever. So that's the other thing about it. If you buy a big heavy one, you're going to be stuck with it for a while. So you better like it. It's kind of like taking a cutting torch to something. And the other thing is to think about all these protrusions on the side. Because if you're not paying attention and you walk down the side of this, where is this thing? These are head knockers. Used to the adjustment on the slide on chutes, a lot of them will have a pipe that come out where you can actually take it loose and pin it. They've gotten away from most of those, but they're trip hazards. You turn around and walk down the side of it and fall over your adjustments. So we wrote an article for Progressive Cattlemen several years ago called Safety Around Chutes or something like that. And it was amazing how many injury points there are on a chute. You know, that's where we got to thinking about these things. Nobody ever talks about this, but cutting your fingers off there. These are pinch points. These handles right here. Anybody ever been hitting the rib with one of them handles? It hurts like hell. Just be honest about it. And this one's so tight it won't fall down. You're supposed to fall down when you're not using it. You pick it up and use it. So you need to loosen that up or get the paint off of it to where it'll actually get out of the way. Now some of them are welded right there. Right? And if it is, it's probably not quite that long. Yeah. It's about halfway down to WW. Yes. Yeah, I've been around a bunch of chutes. Now one thing this old chute has that I really like, and we're seeing it on more and more chutes, is this head restrainer. And there's a lot of different ways to restrain heads, but that actually cuffs their chin in it, keeps them from throwing it. It does not keep them from moving it, but it's a whole lot safer than it is sticking out here slinging around. And they also have neck extender bars that fit on some that will stabilize the head. You see those more on hydraulics than you do on manuals, but there are some on manuals. I think Preferred even makes a head extender for their chutes manual that will fit on those head gates. I just now realize that's spring loaded. That'd come up and pop you in the chest. That would be unhandy. So anything that springs up like that makes me nervous, because I'm gonna forget it at some point in time and whack myself.
Tammy said we need to wrap it up.
I don't want to wrap it up, Tammy. It's too much fun. We'll be around the rest of the day too, so if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We'll be back here working, processing cattle through the chute and everything else at 3 o'clock.